You probably aren't used to thinking of Salem witches and Plymouth Pilgrims together. But who is it that bridges two important moments in Massachusetts and American history, connecting the Mayflower to the Salem witch trials? Welcome to The Thing About Salem. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
And I'm Sarah. Here's a post-Thanksgiving treat from your friendly neighborhood, Mayflower, and Salem witch trials descendant while you enjoy your leftovers the umpteenth day in a row. Hopefully not too many days.
While you're settling in after a busy or lazy Thanksgiving, we want to talk about a man whose story reveals how social status could mean the difference between life and death during the Salem witch hunt.
That man is Captain John Alden. He was the son of Mayflower passengers, a decorated war hero, successful merchant, and one of the most respected men in Boston. He seemed untouchable. But in 1692, not even his rank in society or his Mayflower parentage could protect him when the accusations came. His experience shows us that witch hunt panic didn't just target the vulnerable and marginalized. It eventually reached even the colonial elite.
So today we're looking at what happened when one of Massachusetts' most prominent citizens found himself accused of witchcraft, and what his story tells us about the machinery of the trials themselves.
Who was Captain John Alden?
He was the son of signer of the Mayflower Compact, John Alden Jr. He passed just 5 years before the Salem witch trials.
His parents were Mayflower passengers John and Priscilla. Priscilla's family came on the Mayflower and did not make it past that first year. His parents married around 1622 or 1623, making theirs one of the first marriages in Plymouth.
So Captain John Alden, he was born in about 1626, and in 1659, he married Elizabeth Phillips Everell.
Captain John Alden was a sea captain during King William's War, and he helmed one of the ships of the Massachusetts Navy called the Mary.
So in between October 1688 and April 1692, during King William's War, Alden went up the coast from Boston to northern New England and Acadia 16 times or more on government business. His son, John Alden Jr., was captured in Acadia and eventually ransomed. In July 1690, Alden was ordered to go to Marblehead and get a cannon from them to use in the war effort. This was when Governor Phipps, before he was governor, he was leading the military on an expedition to take Quebec. And so they were rounding up cannons everywhere. But when they got to Marblehead, they beat the drums and all the militiamen came out. There was 60 to 70 men angry that confronted John Alden, and he never got that cannon.
He was a Bostonian who was a charter member of Reverend Samuel Willard's Old South Meeting House, also known as Third Church in Boston. In January 26 of 1692, which is right at the beginning of the Salem witch trials, he is in court.
Yeah, John Alden was in court on that date in Boston. He was there facing Anthony Checkley, who had some legal background and had represented Captain John Alden in some early court cases that John wasn't able to attend himself. But Checkley was there to sue John for £5 of back pay. Fortunately for Alden, the jury found in his favor, but the court dismissed a different action that Alden had taken, a suit against Mark Emerson for defamation of character. They threw that one out. Emerson was formerly a hostage, and he was a redeemed captive, basically, of the French and Native Americans. He had said that while he was in captivity for 2.5 years in Maine, he had seen Alden sell the Indians powder and shot. And so Alden was suing him for defamation for saying that he sold that. And the jury found for Emerson, saying that Alden couldn't prove that that was not true. On May 28th, a complaint was filed by Joseph Holton and John Walcott against John Alden, but also a host of other people.
Host.
Martha Carrier, you might have heard of her, Elizabeth Fosdick, Wilmot Red, Sarah Rice, Elizabeth Howe, William Proctor, John Flood, Mary Toothaker, Margaret Toothaker, and Arthur Abbott.
Margaret was a child.
Margaret was the daughter of Roger Toothaker. So a few days after the complaint was issued on May 31st, an arrest warrant was issued for Captain John Alden. And according to the warrant, Alden was complained of by a whole series of afflicted people: Mary Walcott, Mercy Lewis, Abigail Williams, Elizabeth Booth, Elizabeth Hubbard, Ann Putnam, and Mary Warren. Mary Walcott is one of the people named in the warrant as being harmed by John Alden. It was her brother, John, who was one of the two men who filed the complaint against that whole slew of people, including John Alden and Martha Carrier, all those people John Walcott accused on behalf of his sister.
He was arrested, and apparently it was uneventful enough that he did not give a story about it to Robert Califf, who later gives his account, and there's no other real details on it. But we do know the date because an order was sent by Salem magistrates to the prison keeper in Boston.
Yeah, they had arrested him down in Boston and put him in that local jail, and the Salem judges wanted him to come up there for examination. And when he did come up for examination, that was eventful. And he wrote a whole account of this in Robert Califf's book, More Wonders of the Invisible World, which was published 2 years before Alden passed. He passed in 1702, and this was published in 1700.
It's a great account, and in it, he refers to himself as senior and emeritor.
And he says, this is a quote from him: "Those wenches being present, who played their juggling tricks, falling down, crying out, and staring in people's faces." That's how he referred to the afflicted people.
In his account, he recalls that the judges asked the afflicted people to identify him, and that one pointed to a Captain Hill until a man whispered in an afflicted girl's ear. Then she pointed out Alden.
So after this afflicted person did eventually point out Alden in the meeting house where he was being examined, the judges ordered everyone to go out into the street. And in his account, he says, all were ordered to go down into the street where a ring was made. And the same accuser cried out, "There stands Alden, a bold fellow with his hat on before the judges. He sells powder and shot to the Indians and French, and lies with the Indian squaws, and has Indian papooses." Then was Alden committed to the marshal's custody, and his sword taken from him, for they said he afflicted them with his sword.
Later, Alden was made to stand on a chair for all to see him.
Judge Bartholomew Gedney said he had known Alden many years and had been at sea with him, and always looked upon him to be an honest man. But now he did see cause to alter his judgment. Alden answered he was sorry for that, but he hoped God would clear up his innocency, that he would recall that judgment again, and added that he hoped that he should with Job maintain his integrity till he died. The evidence against John Alden was pretty thin, actually. There was one testimony of Mary Warren, and it was against George Burroughs, John Alden, Elizabeth Carey, and Ann Pudiator. So she's testifying against 4 people at once. The testimony goes, "The testimony of Mary Warren, aged 20 years or thereabouts, testifieth and saith that sometime in July last, Mr. Burroughs pinched me very much and choked me almost to death. And I saw and heard him sound a trumpet. And immediately I saw several come to him, as namely Captain Alden, Miss Carey, and Goody Pootiator, and several others, and they urged me to go along with them to their sacramental meeting. And Mr. Burroughs brought to me bread to eat and wine to drink, which I refusing, he did most grievously torment me, urging me vehemently to write in his book. Also, I've seen Mr. George Burroughs, or his appearance most grievously tormenting, Mary Walcott and Ann Putnam, and I verily believe in my heart that Mr. George Burroughs is a dreadful wizard, and that he has several times tormented me and the aforesaid persons by his acts of witchcraft. So the one testimony that mentions Alden is primarily about George Burroughs. Alden just happens to be along for the ride to the sacrament.
So he's arrested and he goes to the Boston jail for 15 weeks. It's a whole season.
So while Alden was in jail on July 20th, 1692, there was a fast held at Captain Alden's house, I guess with his wife and family hosting. This fast was held upon his account.
Cotton reported that Mr. Willard prayed, that he himself read a sermon out of Dr. Preston, and Captain Scottow prayed, Mr. Allen came in and prayed, and that Cotton and Captain Hill sung together the first part of Psalm 103. And they were there till 5 p.m. So he spent 15 weeks in jail, and we have a couple sources that reports that Captain Alden escapes. Califf says, observing the manner of the trials and the evidence then taken, which we've talked about, this crazy evidence, the touch test, the sore being bewitched, he prevailed to escape. And we know he went to Duxbury, Massachusetts, where his relatives resided.
He may have been helped to escape by his minister, Samuel Willard. On December 31st, Alden appeared before Judge John Richards, who was one of the judges of the Court of Warrior and Terminer in Salem, but was also a judge locally in Boston. And Judge Richards released Alden on 200 pounds bond, which Alden paid along with Nathaniel Williams and Samuel Checkley.
John Alden was cleared by proclamation on April 25th, 1693, in Boston. The court record states John Alden of Boston, mariner who stood recognized for his appearance at this court upon suspicion of witchcraft being called, appeared and was discharged by proclamation.
So he escaped. He comes back on his own free will, knowing things are going well, and gets released on bond. So he's a free man to reside in his own home and do his own routine again while he waits for this day. And he comes in for like 2 minutes and they're like, you're good.
He, like many others, only lived a handful of years past the witch trials. He died on March 14th, 1702.
His gravestone can be visited in the Old South Church. It's in the portico. But you mentioned other people who had also lived only a few years after the witch trials. He made it about 9 years after the witch trials ended. But William Stoughton was already dead by 1702. Sheriff George Corwin, Anne and Thomas Putnam, Governor Phipps had passed, Francis Nurse had passed, James Howe, Captain Jonathan Walcott, the father of the John and Mary that we mentioned earlier in the show, Captain Bartholomew Gedney, the judge that had been friends with Alden but changed his mind, Reverend John Hale, who published a book called A Modest Inquiry into the Nature of Witchcraft, and Samuel Parris's wife, Elizabeth Sr. They had all passed away already within 10 years of the witch trials. So there you have it. The Alden family bridged two defining moments in early American history. John Alden Sr. signed the Mayflower Compact in 1620, helping establish the foundations of self-governance of the colonizers in the New World. 72 years later, his son, Captain John Alden, a charter member of one of Boston's most important churches and a decorated war hero, found himself accused of witchcraft in Salem.
The Alden story shows us that the Panic of 1692 wasn't just about the vulnerable or marginalized or just women. It could reach anyone, even the most prominent colonial families with significant Mayflower credentials. Captain Alden's experience reveals both how far the accusations reached and how someone with resources, connections, and sheer audacity could navigate the deadly machinery of the trials and survive.
From the deck of the Mayflower to a Salem courtroom, the Aldens witnessed and shaped the earliest and darkest chapters of New England history. Have a great today and beautiful leftovers.